Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about the realities of recording in a home studio. And I struggle to take this topic seriously because I can't in good conscience call this space a recording studio. The sign I have that says Mario's House Recording Studio was gifted to me more as a tongue-in-cheek joke more than a serious declaration of such. There are some very basic things lacking in this recording space, and it's a far cry from being a professional studio. But regardless, half the fun in home recording is overcoming your limitations and finding your sound naturally through that process. So let's get a little background here. Home recording is a concept that is very hard to pinpoint exactly when it came to fruition. There is some argument that Edison's phonograph in 1877 laid the groundwork for what was to become home recording, but I think a more accurate date could be set farther into the future in the 1930s with RCA's invention of the recordio. RCA's recordio was a device that was able to record a microphone or a radio signal onto a blank disc, recorded and played back at 78 RPM. This was the first time the mass consumer had access to a device that was relatively affordable and was able to do such functions. Unfortunately, due to a little thing called the Great Depression, this was unable to catch on to a large audience. When a certain group of Germans discovered the benefits of using AC bias during the tape recording process, the audio tape recording format was finally able to become dependable. But for me, when I personally think of home recording, I immediately think of the great Les Paul. And Les Paul was a man of many firsts and an innovator in many facets in life. And during his time in the 1940s and 1950s, he spent a considerable amount of time in his garage recording on equipment and innovating the recording world that way. Eventually, Les Paul started recording on his custom-made 8-track Ampex tape recorder, famously referred to as the Octopus. Les Paul was extremely successful in his endeavors, and to me, he is the foundation of home recording. But I think a really important milestone in home recording, and perhaps the start for some people's definition of home recording, comes with Tascam's invention of the Portastudio in 1979. When Tascam introduced the Portastudio onto the market, there were waves upon waves of new home recording individuals. This was the first time people had access to a reliable and cheap multi-track tape recorder. In this case, it was recording on cassettes. And I would argue this is probably the most agreed upon start date of home recording as we define it today. Why am I so obsessed with defining when home recording starts? I don't know, but I guess that's just how I'm starting out this video. Regardless, over the decades since, home recording has evolved in mediums along the way. Starting with cassette and tape, it went to ADAT tape, then to hard disk recorders, and then eventually makes its way into the computer world. For the sake of being brief, I did not mention a lot of the less popular recording mediums. And a large majority of the people watching this video today solely record on a computer through the use of a DAW. This is obviously a much different and more sophisticated recording medium in a home recording studio. One thing that has remained constant, though, is the physical reality of being in your home. To help facilitate this conversation, I am going to focus on my specific home recording setup, as well as the experiences and lessons I have learned along the way. However, I would like to continue the conversation below in the comments so everyone could talk about their experiences and talk about a lot of the things that I'm probably going to miss in this video. So let's start this topic by talking about the location of my recording studio. Right now, we are sitting in a sunroom that I repurposed in my house to be a control room. And big air quotes on the word control room there, and we'll get more into that later. In this control room, I have all my recording equipment that I have strategically placed so I can easily reach and manipulate them. And this room is directly connected to my so-called live room. I try not to keep my recording equipment in this room, as I try to keep this as a functioning living room, so to speak. I do my best to really try to consolidate all of my music equipment, but I have a crippling junk buying obsession that I seem not to be able to shake, so naturally my house is very quickly becoming filled up with a bunch of musical junk laying around everywhere. Furthermore, I live in a suburban neighborhood where my neighbors are relatively close to me, and this dictates a lot I could do without pissing off said neighbors. And even before I started recording music, I've been playing drums in this house for many years, and I have yet to get one complaint from any single one of my neighbors. And I'm not sure if that is because they're very patient with me, or I am very critical of paying attention to their peace and quiet. It is likely a combination of both. For starters, I never play loud music or play loud instruments outside of a reasonable time window. Usually starting around 11 a.m. is when I'll start cranking my amps, and around 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. depending on the sunlight outside, I will start to wind things down. And this is important to note because by legal rights, I have the ability to rock out in this town from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now, if I just started cranking on the skins of my drum set at 7 a.m., I am sure I am going to have a bunch of angry neighbors banging at my front door. And we try to avoid this at all costs. So, like I'm saying, make sure you keep your time to a reasonable window. Things will become even more difficult for you if you live in a place such as an apartment where you cannot avoid being directly connected to your neighbors. This is going to affect how loud you could play and record instruments to a great degree. In an apartment building, depending on your neighbors, you may not even be able to play drums in said apartment building. So you are going to have to learn to adapt to your circumstances. And this goes for all instruments, even your vocals. But regardless, you should always keep in mind not to be a to your neighbors. And even more so when you live with people. I'm sure a lot of you have roommates, whether they be friends, family, lovers, anything in between, and you are going to have to work around their schedules and learn not to annoy the ever-loving out of them. And trust me, I get the frustration. I am a drummer who grew up with two older sisters who never ever let me play said drums. It is very frustrating when you have to work around other people's schedules, but you have to do what you have to do. It's very important not to piss off the people you live with. And in today's present day, I have the extreme luxury of living alone, and this has greatly helped my recording and practicing time when it comes to music. Since I am a novice for many instruments, I am often repeating the same riffs, same parts, same chord progressions for days, sometimes months, right? When I'm doing vocal practices, you know how annoying I get? It would not be possible if I lived with someone. So I take great advantage of living alone. In fact, I am extremely spoiled because of this. And when I am recording my music, I often take a whole day just to do the tracking process, just to get all the main instruments set to tape. And, you know, that's going to take sometimes a full 8 hours, sometimes a full 10 hours, sometimes even more. And if you have people moving around in your house, on the phone, watching TV, it's just not going to be possible in a situation that I am in, like myself, where my recording space is in the open space of my house. In the same vein, talking about noise, let's talk about the acoustics in a home recording studio. And there are three things to consider here. The first is soundproofing, and this is being able to block sound from getting out as well as into your studio. In this current setup, I am constantly having cars and sirens go by, and sometimes that can get into my recordings and ruin a take. The second thing you're going to want to worry about in regards to the acoustic is diffusing the sound in the room. Diffusion is really important in getting out an even frequency response of your room. If you look in my live room, I have a lot of uneven surfaces, and this helps alleviate this issue. And I like to refer to this as natural diffusion, whereas artificial diffusion is when you specifically buy a piece of acoustical treatment meant to diffuse the sound. Sometimes you could just use these stuff around in your house as your diffusers. Things only really start to become a problem in this area when you are recording in a room with 4 straight, square, and bare walls. That's no good, and you're gonna get a lot of problem frequencies that way. And the third thing you're gonna have to worry about is reverberation, and this is perhaps the hardest thing to alleviate. You would be surprised how much acoustic padding you need to successfully remove excess reverberation from a room. I have found in my setup in my live room with its very tall ceiling, it's almost impossible without getting some sort of gobo structure to isolate sounds. I thought about building my own acoustic absorbers. However, I do not necessarily want acoustic barriers hanging up in my live room, as this is my living room and I intend to live in this space, and those really just don't look that aesthetically pleasing. And another thing I must mention in regards to acoustics in the room is the presence of rattles and buzzes. And these rattles and buzzes can manifest themselves in a lot of different objects in your recording space. My cabinets in particular like to resonate a lot on some lower frequencies, and it can become a problem when I'm recording a track. If a certain note is being played often, I will have to tape down certain items so they don't resonate with certain frequencies. In personal opinion alert, I think all of these acoustical barriers that I've been talking about is what separates a lot of home recordings from sounding like a true professional recording. I think this has a much bigger effect than the type of microphone you use, the type of preamp, the recording medium, stuff like that. The acoustics in your room have to be right in your ear before it ever hits a microphone. That is extremely important to remember. Furthermore, having your control room in the same shared space as your live room, as in they are directly connected without a barrier, is a huge detriment as a recording engineer. As a recording engineer, you want to be able to monitor microphone signals independent of the sound in the room. And this is going to cause issues in a couple ways. The first way it's going to cause issue is with feedback, because your monitors are going to be in the same room as your microphones. So you are going to have to monitor your signal with headphones rather than your monitor speakers. And that may not seem like a big deal, but this means that you have to remember to turn off your monitors whenever you go to listen to a microphone signal, because you are going to be surprised how often you forget to simply press a button to stop this from happening. It happens to me all the time. I get feedback squealing. Sometimes I blow out people's eardrums and headphones. It's no good, it's unprofessional, and it's hard to avoid in a situation like this. And the second and more important reason is that you're not able to accurately monitor the microphone signal with this sort of setup. For example, if I am recording a loud guitar amp in the live room right over there, it is going to be impossible for me to completely separate the sound swirling around in the room from the signal I want to be hearing in my headphones. It is ultimately going to be influenced by both sounds. And it's not until playback of said recording signal where I'm able to make a final determination if my levels are set right, if my EQ is correct, if my compression is where I want it to be. And that is a huge setback, especially when you're recording a live band where there's multiple microphones, multiple instruments, and so many things to consider. It is very hard to monitor all these microphones effectively. And this is not the only detriment my control room has. I hate to sound like a broken record, but the acoustics in this control room are abysmal. In a professional recording studio, a control room is going to be specifically designed to give you a neutral and balanced frequency spectrum in the room. And this is really important when you're doing mix downs of your songs. Professional recording studios will go as far as hiring professional sound technicians to come in and help tune the room. This, of course, is not the case in this room. We are working in a really small room, which is not good, on really cheap monitors, which is not good, with really bad reverberation issues, which is not good. All these things are going to color the signal I am hearing from my monitors in combination with each other. This isn't the worst thing in the world as long as you get personally accustomed to the sound and frequency response of your room. You will learn to tune your ears to know what is going to sound better on different playback systems and different mediums, whether that be in your car, on your phone, on a laptop. You'll begin to know the characteristics of your room. It just takes a little bit of time. Another thing to consider is the physical size of your room. And that is because I have a lot of equipment packed into this very small space. And I plan to keep on expanding my equipment. And as of right now, I really don't have any more room to. I'm gonna have to do some significant reorganization to make more equipment work in this setup. And you don't even want to see the goddamn mess of cables I have going on behind this control desk. It is an absolute mess. It's embarrassing, okay? But in this small setup, I don't really have a choice. Everything's kind of just crammed back there. And I do periodically go in and completely start from scratch with all my cables, take all the cables out, route everything all nice, zip tie everything, label everything nice. But eventually, between having to add equipment, take some out for repair, running out of cables, running out of working cables, the mess going on here is endless, and that cable management very quickly just turns into a mess. And to make this cable management issue even worse, I have a very limited amount of electrical outlets in this room. I currently have 4 power strips packed to the gills, and that's still not enough to connect every single piece of equipment on my control desk here to permanent power. And that means I have to occasionally swap out power cords to use certain pieces of equipment, and this is obviously a pain in the ace. From a safety and fire standpoint, it's also not a good idea to have a huge rat's nest of cables just crammed somewhere in a small space. And as far as electrical requirements go, this type of audio equipment does not nearly draw as much amperage as something like a refrigerator or a washing machine, air conditioner, something like that. So it's not really the electrical load problem that I'm worried about. It's just some of the cables I have are questionable. A lot of them are really old and don't have a grounding prog on them. And because of that, all the kind of dodgy equipment and all the stuff without a grounding plug and stuff without a power switch on the front of the unit, I keep that all on one single power strip that I turn on and off every single recording session. This way, when I walk away at the end of the day, I don't have to worry about something being on or burning down or anything like that. Another issue in regards to the electrical requirements in your home studio is the often lack of access to clean electrical power. And by clean power, I mean power that is conditioned by a unit to remove any fluctuations in voltage or to remove any interference. And 99% of the time, this is not something you need to worry about. This only really becomes an issue if you have something with a high inductive motor load cycling on and off in your house. Say, for example, an air condition, a telephone, I guess. Hold on. Who's calling me right now? Hello? It was a telemarketer. Anyway, when there's something like a washing machine or an air conditioner somewhere in your house and the motor in this machine is cycling on and off, you're going to hear some slight differences in the noise floor of your recordings. And 99% of the time, this is going to be covered up by the buzz of a guitar amp or the hiss of your tape or anything of that nature. It only really becomes an issue if you're recording something a little more quiet, something like classical piano where there's quiet passages where the noise floor becomes a really important factor in your recording process. And this is easily fixed by buying electrical power conditioners that are specifically meant for audio applications. That stuff tends to be a little bit on the expensive side, and as such, I do not have the capital yet to have such equipment. And expanding further on the topic of equipment, the gear that I have in this home recording studio is nowhere near comparison to the equipment you're going to find in a professional recording setup. Most, if not all, depending on your definition of this equipment, is budget equipment that I have bought used. The level of quality of some of this gear, as well as the quantity of the gear, is severely lacking. If you're used to working purely in a DAW in the computer digital world, you may look at my setup and think it is really an extensive setup, but I assure you nothing is farther from the truth. Besides my 16 track, all of the equipment you see here I have bought for very cheap prices, and it's often in need of repair. And because of that, I am dealing with constant issues regarding repairs. And that's just the nature of working with equipment that's 20 to 60 years old. I spend a lot of time troubleshooting stuff, wiggling wire, changing out cables, soldering little components, stuff like that. And if you have a home recording studio in analog fashion as such, you are definitely going to need to get your hands dirty. And this is much less of a concern at a professional studio, where the equipment you're using is better maintained, easier accessed, in a controlled environment, and often serviced by a professional technician. And I don't mean to diss any of the equipment I own. A lot of this stuff works fantastically for me, but I think it is disingenuous to compare the level of quality of a lot of this equipment to the quality of equipment in a professional recording studio. Even the highest quality piece of gear I own, this 16 track, is somewhat of a lower end multi-track tape machine of this era. You have probably not have seen this machine at a really high class recording studio. This was more for the budget recording studios. Once again, I'm not dissing this thing. I love this thing, but it's a far cry from comparing this to something like a Studer. And there are going to be some people who have home recording studios that have this professional level audio equipment, and I salute those people, and I am slowly but surely getting there myself. An often overlooked aspect of your recording environment is your climate control. In the hot summer months, an air conditioning unit is going to be your worst enemy. The main AC unit that is in my house that cools the bulk of my house is located directly in my live room, and this causes many issues. It is very loud in the microphones, and as such I have to turn it off when I am recording my tracks in order for the background level noise to be manageable. And boy oh boy, does it get hot within the matter of like 3 minutes in this house during the summer months without air conditioning. There must be zero insulation in this walls. And this isn't a gigantic deal when I am recording my own material and I'm by myself and I just deal with the sound and I just start dressing, dripping sweat like a sexy little animal I am. But when I have friends over to record, you know, I want them to be as comfortable as possible, one, as a host, and two, because I want to get a stellar performance out of said people. And if they're sweating their petunias off, it is going to be very hard to get that stellar end product. Central air is really going to be a lifesaver here in order to cool your recording space without making a huge amount of excess background noise. And a lot of the limitations you're going to have to overcome in your home recording studio is in regards to the little things. I'm constantly running out of cables, I'm constantly running out of microphone stands, I'm constantly running out of compressors to use when I'm tracking, running out of headphones for when people are here tracking a live band. There's significant stuff lacking, and this sort of thing is slowly built over time. You can't expect to have 20 microphone cables when you're first starting home recording. These things build up over time, and you learn to acquire things for cheap. This way you're not shelling out thousands upon thousands, you know, in a short amount of time. And the last thing I'll mention about home recording is two-faced, and this is due to the fact that you are physically located within your home. On one hand, if you're a lone wolf recording all by yourself, this is fantastic news. It's extremely accessible, it's cheap, it's effective, it's there whenever you need it, it's your own personal space, it's awesome. But if you are in the market of recording other people and other bands, you are going to have to be okay with people coming into your home. And I've never had a bad experience with anyone that I have recorded in my house, but that's because I have only recorded with people I've personally known as friends. This may not be the case if you're recording bands that you do not personally know. You never know who you're going to get involved with, if they're going to wreck your house, if they're going to respect your studio and equipment. You know, so this is something you have to consider. And Another thing is when you're having people come into your house and your recording space is directly connected to your living space, that means these people are going to be in your living space. You know, these people are going to be seeing my family portraits, my baby photos, all my personal belongings, love letters, dirty bloomers on the floor, and everything in between, right? It's going to be unavoidable. In a lot of situations, you're going to be expected to be a host of these people. At minimum, you're obligated to give people refreshments, but do you feed them as well? Do you wipe their ass? Do you do this? You do that? It's really going to depend on the specific situation. I think the best solution here is to have your home recording studio in an area of your house that is isolated from the rest of your house. If you have a garage or a barn in the back or even a basement, those are all great places to put an isolated recording studio where people are not going to be walking through the main part of your home. And with all this considered, you have to remember that you want to present a professional environment to potential clients that are paying you for a professional product. All in all, home recording is an extremely important aspect of the musical landscape today, and there have been fantastic albums since the 1970s onwards of great artists putting out great albums on home recording setups. A couple people off the top of my head, both famous and lesser known that I could think of that are involved in home recording in some way, are people like Paul McCartney, Pete Townsend, Neutral Milk Hotel, John Dwyer, Emmett Rhodes, Michael Yonkers, you know, I'm probably forgetting so many people, Daniel Johnston, Mac DeMarco, yeah, the list is endless. I'm forgetting so many important people, but those are just names that I could think of off the top of my head that are artists that have made some fantastic home recorded albums. Okay, folks, that is it for today. I hope I answered some of the questions that I have been getting in the comments about home recording. I didn't go into specifics about the layout I have going on here. If you guys are interested in a video like that, I could quickly put something like really informal together of me just kind of quickly going over some of the equipment I have and how it's all connected. You know, it's really not that complicated. I have a 16-track tape machine that's connected to this mixing board here. I also have, which you cannot see in this shot, the Alesis HG24 that is also connected to this mixing board, so I could record onto either or. With a flick of a button, I could switch between the two. I could even record onto both at the same time if I wanted to. And then when I'm mixing down or when I'm tracking, I use a variety of compressors. Over here, I have some delay and reverb units over here. I have some really cheap compressors up here. I really only have one specific preamp here, the MP 5.66. There's other things up here that I use as preamps, but they're not really preamps, like this Shure microphone mixer. That's one of my favorites. This Bogan preamp is once again not a preamp. It's just, well, I guess it is a preamp, but it's not meant for music recording. I have some digital delays up here that I don't know if you could even see them in the shot. Maybe I'll get a close-up. I also have to connect all of this equipment to route it on my control board. I have a couple of patch bays here, and I actually just recently changed this setup. I had some 1/4-inch jack patch bay and a combination of RCA patch bay, but I changed it to all RCA now. I'm going to utilize that other patch bay for something else. Okay, now I'm just talking about random stuff now. I also have this 2-track tape machine over here that I use for my mix downs, and I mean that's kind of it. It's really not that complicated. I am going to eventually do a video going over the specifics of, you know, how to use a mixing board and, you know, how to use a tape machine. And because I get a lot of people ask me that question, a lot of people that are so used to the digital DAW world that this stuff seems like rocket science to them. And I guarantee once I make that video, so much of the mystification is going to go away. I think recording in this way is so much easier to understand in your brain than recording on a computer. I was never able to grasp recording on a computer. It's just so much more simpler. I promise you. I recommend everyone to be as hands-on as possible when recording music. Okay, I am getting off topic here. Let's see. Let's look at my idiot sheet here. Yes. Okay. So all this equipment I have been slowly building up over the course of, I guess, 2 or 3 years at this point. And when I first started recording music, all I had was an 8-track tape recorder that I got off Craigslist for really cheap, basically pocket change for a tape recorder like that. And all I had was an SM57 to pair along with that. That is all I had, and that's how I kind of cut my teeth, just with one microphone and a simple 8-track recorder. And you don't need all this fancy equipment to have some fun in the recording studio. I often have the most fun on a crappy portable cassette recorder I bought for $1 at Goodwill than I have with this equipment sometimes. You know, money should never be a limitation in getting a good end product. It's hard, or it's easy rather, to fall into that trap where you go, well, I don't have that equipment, so I'm never going to sound good. I'm never going to have a product that's good. And that's bogus. That's BS. You really don't need top-notch equipment. There are some people I mentioned earlier, like Daniel Johnston, that are recording on like that little portable cassette recorder like I'm talking about, that you're able to make music that is listened to and enjoyed by millions of people. So what I'm trying to say is, don't let the lack of equipment stop you from creating something that is worthwhile. And in today's world with DAWs, there's no excuse. I mean, you have access to everything you need to make a professional product, so there's no excuse. So on that note, everyone just get the hell off YouTube. Let's go in our recording setups and record some music, okay? I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Also, before we go, I want to mention I have a music video coming out for my upcoming album. I'm just waiting on something specific, Tim, to finish, and then that will be out soon. So maybe in like 3 weeks or so, that will be out. I am also coming out with my first album soon. I am currently working on the cover, and once that is done, it is completely finished, and I can't wait to post it to get some opinions and feedback from you guys. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.